Thanks for coming to our session. My name is Jeremy Kedziora. I am an associate professor and Pieper Power Endowed Chair of Artificial Intelligence at MSOE. So I spend my days, doing scientific research and teaching about AI and stuff like that. I'll apologize in advance. I'm just coming off of an adrenaline-inducing effort to turn in 2 scientific research papers to a conference, the deadline for which is like in an hour. So I might be a little punch drunk. I'm going to apologize for that in advance. A little bit about my background. Like I said, I'm a professor these days, but previously I served at the Central Intelligence Agency for 9 years, and I led data science and AI efforts at a tech startup. I managed a data science team at Northwestern Mutual. So I have some strong preferences and views about things you should keep in mind when you're trying to incorporate quantitative methods, AI, machine learning, modeling, and stuff like this in a business setting. And I hopefully will be able to try and convey some of that today, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague George here, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the programming we have at MSOE that might be useful. So what we'll talk about today is introducing and implementing AI across the organization. I always like to start these AI talks off with a pop culture reference. And so hopefully some folks, it's kind of dated now, but hopefully some folks will have seen the movie Iron Man, right? So that this metaphor will land, right? So in the movie Iron Man, you have fast-talking genius billionaire Tony Stark, played memorably by Robert Downey Jr., right? And he invents the Iron Man suit, and that's what the whole movie is about. It's about the Iron Man suit. Thing is, though, Tony doesn't invent the Iron Man suit by himself. He has the assistance of an artificial intelligence assistant named Jarvis that he created. And if you watch Iron Man, you'll see Jarvis and Tony talking to each other. Tony will give Jarvis tasks to do, and Jarvis will do the tasks. And if you look at this as somebody who works and does research in AI, right, the kind of inescapable conclusion is that something like Jarvis, fictitious though it might be, if it were to be real, would have to be the seamless composition of many different artificial intelligence systems working together in some way, right? So Jarvis recognizes Tony's face. So Jarvis is doing some sort of facial recognition. That's one kind of AI. Jarvis can understand Tony's spoken language, right? He understands the audio waveform that Tony generates when he speaks, the same thing that I'm generating right now when I'm speaking. And he can decode that. That's another kind of AI. He's doing speech recognition. Jarvis responds to Tony in natural spoken language. So Jarvis is doing generative natural language processing. That's another form of AI, right? We'll come back to that one in just a few minutes. Right? And so the list just kind of goes on and on and on. I think when people think about the promise of AI, and you think about all the hype around it, that's been spawned by ChatGPT's introduction in late 2022, this is what you think of. You think of this benign, artificially intelligent assistant that you can work with, and that'll multiply your productivity a whole lot. That's good, right? That's the good end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, you got this guy, right? You've got HAL 9000, infamously murderous rogue AI from Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 Space Odyssey from back in the 1960s, right? And so if you watch 2001, you'll see HAL on the spaceship with the astronauts, and HAL and the astronauts interact in much the same way that Tony and Jarvis do. They talk to each other, right? The astronauts give HAL tasks to do, and mostly he does the tasks until he decides to stop doing the tasks and start killing the astronauts. And the implication is that just like Jarvis, if HAL were to be real, it must also be the composition of many different artificially intelligent systems kind of working together. Both Jarvis and HAL are examples of what somebody in the field like me would think of as an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, right? A machine that's capable of taking on any task, learning anything without any human intervention. So I like to give this introduction example because to me it pins down the possible in the future, right? And it's a nice contrast with the present, right? To my knowledge, nobody today has developed an AGI. No one knows how to develop an AGI, and we're not even close. And in fact, I can't even conceptualize how you would do it under the current machine learning paradigm that's been around for the last 80 years or something. What we have today, of course, as everybody I'm sure knows, is this, right? We have ChatGPT. And if for anybody who doesn't know, right, I'll just mention, right, ChatGPT, right, is this text-based AI, or was text-based until a few weeks ago, where you can go to OpenAI's website, right? You can type in some information, right, and it'll respond to you. And so this is an example I generated, some months back now, where I went to the OpenAI website and I said, "Hi, ChatGPT, introduce yourself," and ChatGPT responded by generating that. Right? I'm sure most folks have maybe experimented with this or are aware of this now. Right? So as of the time I generated this example, the only thing ChatGPT did was generative natural language processing. Right? So compare that with like the fictitious AGI examples, Jarvis and Hell, do many things. ChatGPT does one thing. Right? It doesn't know stuff. It doesn't have preferences. Doesn't have thoughts. Doesn't have feelings. Right? It doesn't. It can't do tasks. If you gave it a task to do and a lever to pull, it wouldn't know how to pull the lever, and it wouldn't even know how to learn how to pull the lever. So relative to an AGI, something like ChatGPT is super limited. Until a few weeks ago, right, when they revealed GPT 4.0, right, which can now listen to your spoken words, respond in spoken language, and also use images and things like this, right? So it's multimodal in a way that the old version of ChatGPT was not. So it's getting a little bit closer to something like, an AI system with a big list of stuff. Right? So that's the possible future and the current reality, right? The much more limited current reality. So I also think it's worth spending a minute on thinking about what AI is, right? Because it's one of these terms that if you don't kind of pin down, doesn't really, it means a lot of different things, and so it ends up meaning nothing. So when we think about artificial intelligence, I think, the natural question is to say, well, what is a natural intelligence, right? You can contrast artificial intelligence with natural intelligence. So what is a natural intelligence? And my thought there is that we should start by asking, well, what are we, right? The only natural intelligences I see are you and I, right? So what are we? And I would argue that the thing that sets us apart is that we're decision makers. We get to make choices, right, in a way that affects the world in a way that, a single cell bacteria doesn't get to do, right? And so when we think about, what we are, we're decision makers. And when we think about what an artificial intelligence is, the implication is that it must be an automated decision maker, right? A capability, a machine system that can make decisions without any human intervention that affect the world around it in some way, right? And so that's what you're thinking about building and incorporating in a business setting, right? Some sort of automated decision maker when you're thinking about using AI and machine learning. So one more little bit of background. There's lots of different types of AI. And AI is fundamentally World War II era technology. In some sense, no different from nuclear weapons, right? The first people started doing AI type stuff were doing it way back in the 1940s, way back with Alan Turing, right? And even earlier than that. And so that's why I said a minute ago that the machine learning paradigms we use today, the AI paradigms we use today, go way back like 80 years. However, there has been evolution over that time period, and in the 1980s, when I was a kid, right, there was massive increases in computing power, and for the first time, lots of folks had, significant computing resources at their desks, and this really spawned a kind of strong focus on a particular part of AI called machine learning. Right? When we do machine learning, we have data, right? We tell machine learning system kind of how to learn from the data, but we don't tell it what to learn. It learns on its own. Machine learning is a rich field with many different branches, and here are some of the branches right here, right? So there's three that I'll mention, right? Because these are the three kind of big areas that when you're thinking about being in a business setting and trying to work with some data scientists to bring AI and machine learning into your space, these are going to be the kind of the three main capabilities that you're going to be contemplating, right? The first is unsupervised learning. When we do, that's the one at the upper left there, stage right. Unsupervised learning. When we do unsupervised learning, we have a data set, right? And we don't have anything really outside of the data set. And what we're interested in is uncovering the structure in that data. So like, for example, you might have information on, say someone's spending habits, their income, their education level, that kind of thing. You might want to uncover the structure in that data and do some clustering, right? To see if you can put different groups of people together. That's unsupervised learning, right? You want to uncover latent structure. It's often used in like customer segmentation problems and things like this. ChatGPT and most large language models are examples of unsupervised learning. The second big branch of machine learning is called supervised learning. When we do supervised learning, usually we want to predict something. We have some answer and we want to figure out how to predict that answer given information, right? So for example, you might have a bunch of patients who have or have not had cancer. You might have a bunch of demographic information about those patients, maybe some CT scans, things like this. And what you want to do is you want to figure out if you can build a model that can predict whether a patient has cancer or not using their demographic and medical chart information. Tens of thousands of examples of supervised machine learning. A bunch of you have like phones, right? In front of you right now. There's a bunch of supervised machine learning algorithms on those platforms. It's usually the first thing that someone reaches for in the toolbox because it works very well. And then the third branch of machine learning, which is my favorite, is reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is a set of algorithms that you use when you want to solve or manage a really complicated control problem over a long period of time, right? So think like a self-driving car. A self-driving car would almost certainly involve some sort of reinforcement learning to construct the AI that drives the car, right? The car has a lot of sensory inputs that it's taking in, right, about obstacles, about location, about distance to its ultimate destination, and it has to have the capability to take that information and use it to manage the brakes and the steering wheel, right? That's an example of a reinforcement learning problem. So those are the three branches of AI, right, that you might imagine wanting to incorporate in a business setting to solve different kinds of problems, right? Unsupervised, for uncovering latent structure in your data, or maybe, like I said, LLMs, large language models, are examples of unsupervised machine learning. So if you want to make a chatbot or something, that's the bin you're going to be in. If you're interested in predicting, how your customers will respond to initiatives or things like this, that would be a supervised machine learning setting. If you want to manage a big, long, complicated control process over a long period of time, that's a reinforcement learning problem. Okay. So, principled, effective AI use. I would argue this is the goal. If you're in a business setting, this is what you want to do. You want to figure out how you can use AI effectively and use AI in a principled way that's not going to introduce problems, right, into your organization. I think effective AI use really comes down to building good models, right? Engaging in good machine learning practices so that your models are effective, that they predict what you want to predict, that there's not mistakes in them. The principled part is what this slide is about. And I'll admit up front that I thought this was, I saw this in one of my connections presentations, right? A gentleman from Hewlett Packard a few weeks back. I thought it was a great slide, so I asked him if I could nick it for this presentation, and he said I could. So I'll give credit where it's due. But I think it really kind of lays down the bins that underlie principled AI use. The first is responsibility, the second is reproducibility, and the third one is explainability. All right, so taking these in turn. What's responsible AI use? For responsible AI use, as a business, what you need to do is you need to have in place the decision-making support structure to enable you to decide, make principled and good decisions about how and when and whether you're going to use AI. So for example, you want to have model governance processes, right, that allow you, at the executive level to decide, yes, we're going to rely on this or no, we're not. You want to have ongoing monitoring practices, right, so that you can see how the AI is being used, whether it's contributing value to the organization, et cetera. You want to make sure that you have the business processes in place to support use of these two things to inform actual decision making, right? You can have a model governance process on the books. You can have mechanisms to be doing monitoring on the books, but if you don't incorporate them into your business processes, it's sort of useless and doesn't do anything for you. And then finally, as an organization, and when I was at NM, this was a big topic, right? As an organization, you probably want to have some principled conversations about your risk tolerances as it relates to AI. AI and machine learning models, all of them will make mistakes. All of them. They will always make mistakes. There's always risk of mistakes. Every model will do this. And you have to decide, as an organization, how much risk is too much, right? How much risk is too much, and when do you want to pull the plug? When do you want to revert to manual processes? When do you want to revert to a previous version of a model? I've had some very painful experiences with this, where we put something into production, it didn't work, and then we had to roll things back. And I might have had less painful experiences with that if we'd had good risk heuristic conversations beforehand. Okay, second bin, reproducibility. So I don't know, folks may or may not know, right? There is an absolute crisis in the scientific world right now. It's called the reproducibility crisis, where huge amounts of published papers that underlie, things that you use in your daily lives, like drugs and stuff like this, right? Medicinal type stuff, can't be reproduced. You give different researchers the same data and the description of the methods, right, that go into a published paper, and they cannot get to the same outcome. right? So it would be nice if in a business setting, when you're using AI to do impactful things, you didn't have that kind of problem, right? You could reproduce the models that you create and use. So a couple things, right, will bolster the ability to do this. First, having what's called an MLOps platform. There's a lot of different commercial options for MLOps platforms, and what they're intended to do is to create a structure and a system for you to reliably deploy models and use them and keep track of what they're doing and how they're being used and that sort of thing. The second thing that you want is some catalogs, right? Catalogs of data and models. So you're aware of what data sets exist, how you've used them, what models they map into, and that sort of thing. So that, you have a good, reliable mapping of the data that exists in your organization, how it's been preprocessed and pumped into models, so that anybody can redo something, right? You have a star data scientist in your organization, right, that makes something awesome model, it becomes a keystone of the way that you do business, and then they leave for some other opportunity. You're not high and dry and left out, right, because you can't reproduce it. The third thing is lineage and versioning, right? Models are often updated, right? You generate more data, you learn more stuff, and you might want to revise those models in the future. So you want to have a really good sense of the version history for a model. You want to know how model 2.93 differs from model 1.87 and exactly what went into the two models. And then finally, you want to have some good process for comparing things. So again, right, you can make principled decisions about how to put models into production, how to use them, right, when to use different forms of AI, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that if you say, here's two models, model A and model B, we're going to go with model B, that you can reproduce the comparison that led to that decision, right? You want to be able to reproduce that comparison. So you need good methods for model comparison. And then the third bin here is explainability, right? So artificial intelligence systems, machine learning models are very, very complicated. And they're super nonlinear. They take information from high dimensional spaces and blah, 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 blah. No one cares about all the math, right? The bottom line is it makes it very, very difficult for a person to look at that information and understand why an AI or machine learning system made the decisions that it did, why it issued the predictions that it did. It's very, very difficult. And this is really a problem for end user, especially in an industry where you're subject to regulation, right? So like the medical industry, the financial sector, right? These are industries where they have to regularly answer questions about why decisions were made the way that they are, right? Because they're subject to litigation or something like this, or they're subject to regulators. Right, so interpretability is super important. You want to be able to understand why a model, why an AI system makes the decisions that it does, and what factors lead to a particular outcome, right? Because if you're making a decision on whether to issue somebody a loan on the basis of an AI system, right, you probably want to be able to explain to that person why they got a no. That's probably a pretty important thing. For example, if you try and detect cancer, right, in a patient, and you say, no, you don't have cancer, go home, and they come back, 6 months later, and you find out, oh, they have stage 4 cancer. We made a mistake with our machine learning model. You better be able to explain what happened there, right? So explainability, interpretability is super important. Drift detection, right? So models, you fit them, you build them, they're done, right? The version of ChatGPT that's in existence now, you can look at the website and it'll say something like this version was trained in blah, 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 blah. And that's because there's a static model that underlies it. It's not sort of continuously updating. But more data comes in, you learn more stuff, and you probably want to make sure that your model adapts to that, right? Uses the new information that you've learned. I'll give you an example, right? I do some work with a tech startup now. They're in the financial sector, and they're interested in detecting like bad behavior on a financial platform, right? They want to be able to find out, like, based on someone's transaction history, are they a money launderer? Are they a human trafficker, right? Are they an unambiguous bad guy that you'd want to boot off your platform if you could, right? So suppose you build a machine learning model, it's very successful, and it boots a bunch of these accounts off the platform because they are money launderers, they are drug dealers, right? Drug traffickers, human traffickers, etc. Those actors will adapt, right? They'll change the way that they attempt to use platforms, right? And your model, if it doesn't keep up, will become ineffective over time, right? So you want to have some ability to detect that kind of drift. And then finally, you want to be aware of, I have it termed as hallucination detection here. That's a very generative AI, LLM type term. Really, you just want to be aware of what kind of mistakes your model is making, right? Are your models making some kind of systematic mistake, right? Like they're always saying this group of people is more likely to default on a loan or something like this. If that's the case, you probably want to be aware of that so that you can take preventative measures and correct it in some way. So these, I think, are the goal, right? You want to have principled effective AI use in an organization. To have principled effective AI use, you want to pursue these bins, right? Responsibility, reproducibility, explainability. These are the important things to have. So how do you get there? Well, first of all, I would say that you probably want to, invest in AI in a principled way, right? To support those outcomes, to support, right, responsibility, explainability, and reproducibility. And then you're also going to need the right people to do that, right? And that'll be what my colleague George talks about in a little bit. Or I talk about it first, and then I'll turn it over to him, and he'll talk about it more. So principled effective AI use, to me, equals principled AI investment. And I think there's kind of three things to think about here. There's how to start, there's who to involve, and there's the things that you want to avoid. So, how to start. When I was in grad school, what you do when you get a PhD is you do research, right, and you try to make an original contribution to knowledge. Figuring out what that's going to be when you're like, 26, 27 is hard. It's very hard. So my advisor told me, Jeremy, pick something that makes you mad and fix it. Right? And that's how you should select your research topic. And I think the same thing holds true here, right? When you're thinking about, incorporating AI into an organization or place that's never done it before, or to a team that's not used it before, that's what you want to do. Find something that makes you mad, that pisses you off, and fix it, right? Fix it with AI. In particular, what you want to do is choose a small, specific, well-scoped problem to solve. Then I think the next thing to do is you have to identify the goal. Right? There's a lot of different goals that you could have in mind when you're doing AI type stuff. For example, you have to decide, I think, way early if you want to build something in-house or buy something off the shelf. Either way, you're going to need some talent and know-how to make decisions about how to do this, right? But that's something to decide early on. Second thing to decide early on is, do you want to copy or augment? Right? And what I mean by that is, imagine you have a person in charge of a process. Right? And you want to bring AI in to help them out in some way. You got two options, right? You could leave that person in charge of their process, get them some sort of AI assistance so they can do it more efficiently, or alternatively, you could try and make a copy of that person and encode all of their knowledge and expertise into some sort of machine learning system, and then remove them from the process and automate the process altogether. Which one of those two things you do, right, is going to affect the strategy that you pursue, right? The way that you incorporate AI into solving that problem. And then the last bit here, I think, is you want to identify data, right? AI and machine learning are hungry for data. They need lots of data, right? ChatGPT is thought to have used 12 billion documents to train it. So you need lots of data. And some organizations are going to be ready to act on that immediately because they'll have collected data for 30 years and they'll have it in some well-structured form already. And some organizations aren't going to be in that situation. They're going to have to make the decision, got to start collecting data right now. The second thing there, right, the need that we don't have any data and we got to start collecting it, that might seem like, a problem. But I actually think that in some sense, that's like a blessing in disguise. Because if you've got no kind of baggage and history with how your organization has treated the data that it's generated, this is a great opportunity for you to involve all the important stakeholders, in the room immediately right now at the very beginning when you start making those choices. Right? Data science wasn't really a thing in industry 30 years ago. Or if it was, it had different names and different processes. And that means that organizations that made decisions about how to warehouse, store, and architect their data 30 years ago didn't do so with the demands of modern machine learning and data science in mind, right? And this creates some problems for data science teams that I've worked with in the past. Okay, those are the three things I think you want to think about, right? Find some small specific problem, identify your goal, and figure out what data is available. So who should be in the room? I would argue you want at least 3 different groups of people represented in the room. The first is going to be your business problem stakeholders. And this is going to be a group of people, right, that doesn't have a lot of AI ML expertise, but they are in charge of they're in charge of some substantive problem that creates value for the business. That's their job, is to manage and solve that problem. When I was at the agency, gonna be careful now not to say anything that would put me in jail. When I was at the agency, I was in the analytic division, and different teams had responsibility for doing research on different topics, right? They didn't know anything about AI ML, but they were in charge, and it was their research that was going downtown to the White House. They were business problem stakeholders, business problem owners. The second group I think you want is data owners. And this may well be, sometimes this is the same group as business problem stakeholders, and sometimes it's not. So you want the group of people around right in the room who are responsible for collecting, curating, storing, and architecting data, right? Because they're gonna know if something's collected and accessible or if it's not. And you wanna be able to have that constraint, right, in your head at the very beginning, so you don't, overpromise something, or try and create a solution that's wildly at odds with the resources that are available. And then the third group I think you want to have, especially if you're looking to do something in-house, is you want data scientists. This is going to be the group of people that knows stuff about AI ML. And also, hopefully, they're going to be good at taking a business problem, a substantive business problem, and translating it into a machine learning AI requirement, right, that they can act on and solve in some technical way with code, with ML experiments, and that sort of thing. These three groups should be in the room, in conversations from the very beginning. And when, in my past life, right, before I came back to academia, I found that when I had these three groups in the room at the very beginning, things went pretty well. It went okay. It was good. When we didn't have all three of these groups in the room at the very beginning, you had problems, right? Because you might have data scientists who were disconnected from the data, and so they overpromised to business problem stakeholders. You might have data owners and data scientists meeting up, right, and cooking up something that was of no value, right, to a team that owned a substantive problem, right? So these groups should be closely connected, right, from the very beginning. What to avoid? I think there's a couple things to avoid, right? The first is, AI has made a huge splash in the pop science, pop culture scene in the last few years, right? And I think probably doing nothing is maybe not the right approach. Or rather, if you're gonna do nothing, if you're gonna say, yeah, we're not gonna engage with this AI ML stuff, it's not useful, make that a principled decision, right? Be aware of what capabilities are out there and decide that they are, not gonna create value for your organization. The second thing I think you should avoid is you don't want to try to do everything, right? So you don't want to say to yourself, oh, AI is so great, AI is so cool, how can I AI today, right? Because that, to me, feels a lot like a solution in search of a problem, which is fundamentally unproductive, right? You don't want to do that. What you do want to do is, I think what I said at the very beginning, right? You want to find something that makes you mad and fix it. Find a small, specific, scoped, well-defined problem and fix it. Okay, so those are, I think, are kind of lower level things that I would imagine doing. At a high level, right, here are some principles. I think the first is when you're starting to, invest in AI and figure out how to use it in your organization, take it a bit slow, right? Go slow, because if you go slow at the beginning and you do things right and effectively, right, and carefully, it'll help you go a lot faster later, right? For example, you could try and move things along really fast and write some code to do something, and just, write it real fast. It's sloppy, it's not well documented, it's junk. And then in, a couple years, you're gonna have to come back to that and revise it, and that may be a huge effort, especially if the person who originally wrote it is no longer around. This is another thing that I have personal horror stories with, where I had a bunch of code handed to me by a colleague who then resigned, and I was responsible for revising the code, and it took me a month or more just to get it to run once, because it was so nightmarishly documented. So go slow to go fast, and this will prevent the tooling that you're building becoming technical debt that you have to revise later at great personal cost, effort, suffering, blood, sweat, toil, etc. The second thing is, related to this idea of finding a small problem, also find quick wins, right? Take your small problem and iterate on it, solve it quickly, right? And then iterate. You don't have to have the best possible model. You just need to have a model that's better than the incumbent process, right? And if the incumbent process is a person, maybe that just means having a model that does just about as well, but a lot faster. So, and then once you have that, you can iterate on it and make it better over time. The third thing is you want to stay focused, right? Like I said, you don't want to say, oh, how can I AI today? Pick that problem, stick with it, and decide ahead of time, like if you're doing Agile Scrum type stuff, which is a task management process that's commonly used in tech. When you do that, you kind of, for each task, you decide ahead of time what the acceptance criteria are to say that the task is done. That's what you want to do here. Decide on your small focused problem and then decide what the acceptance criteria is that will make you say, I'm done. We're going to deploy this. We're going to move forward. Right? So stay focused. And then finally, and maybe most pertinent to the rest of what we'll talk about for the next 15 minutes, you want to build the right foundation, and that involves having the right people, the right processes. And I talked about some of those kind of business process stuff earlier, right? I think that's the 3 bins of responsibility, reproducibility, and explainability. And then you also want to gird that by having a good group of people who have the know-how to manage these things and make good decisions. And these are kind of all the things I imagine, right, as being important when you're trying to introduce AI into a new place, a new organization, bring it into your business. These are the things that I myself have tried to do when I've run teams in the past and brought kind of AI into a new space. All right, so 3 groups of people. Let me talk a little bit about 3 groups of people, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, and we'll take it out from there. So 3 groups of people. The first is your business partners, business problem owners, right? My sense is that this group of people doesn't need to be able to put hands on keyboard and write 10,000 lines of Python code, right, and build an AI, right, from scratch that involves, training a large language model for months on the server farm. That's not necessary for this group. This group is a group that owns business problems. They need to solve those business problems. The requirements on them are too big. They don't have enough resources to meet those tasks. And what they really need to do is collaborate with people who do AI stuff, machine learning stuff, in an intelligent way, as intelligent consumers to build solutions. So from my perspective, this group of people is going to need stuff like the following skills, right? They're going to need comprehension. They're going to need to understand basic ideas, basic facts related to AI, ML. And the reason for this is because this group of people needs to be able to say, here's my problem, here's how I think an AI machine learning approach could be helpful here, right? They need to have enough to be able to say something like that. And then that can lead them to contact, right, folks who do know about how to write the 10,000 lines of Python code. They're going to need to have some application type skills, right? In particular, they're going to have to, like I just said, operationalize their basic understanding of facts and ideas to suggest opportunities to solve their business problems with AI and machine learning. And then I think this group of people also has a strong role to play in saying to their bosses and higher level executive types, hey, we just worked with the data science team for a few months and we produced something really awesome. And here's why it's awesome. Here's why this is a valid approach that's going to make our business processes much more effective. Right? So they need to be able to evaluate stuff. I think one of the key values that they need to have in front of them, in their heads, to be able to do these things effectively is that they have to be interested in doing things better. So when I was at Northwestern Mutual, I worked with a cybersecurity team. They were business problem stakeholders. They had hundreds of thousands of events that they were supposed to be looking at all the time, right? Flowing in every day, right? So that's unmanageable for a person to do that. Unmanageable for a team of people to do that. They had enough imagination to say, hey, this is a big data situation. Let's talk to the data science people. Maybe they can help us. And that's the thing you need from this group. Second group are doers and reviewers and managers. They need to understand applications at a fairly deep level, right? This group wants to deploy technical expertise. They have it. They want to deploy it. They want to use it. They want to solve business problems. They want to vet solutions. They want to take all the cool stuff they know and they want to use it to impact, right, the quality and the value of the business, right? So the tricky thing is that this group does not generally own business problems. When I was at the agency, I didn't own any. I was not responsible for any research that was going to go down to the president. I had a lot of technical expertise, but I didn't have any problems that I owned, right? So I always had to partner, right? And that's this group of people. They always have to partner with business problem stakeholders. They need to identify problems. They need to collaborate, right? They need to play well with others. That's a key thing for this group, I think. So some skills, right? A lot of the skills here that this group would need to be effective would be kind of machine learning-esque related skills. they need to be able to propose and evaluate and defend the validity of new approaches, right? They need to know stuff about the technical side of things. They need to comprehend and have understanding of facts and ideas related to AI and machine learning. They need to be able to take that and suggest new opportunities to use AI and machine learning in new ways, because this is the key thing that's going to help them reach out and partner with business problem stakeholders, right? It's like a matchmaking type situation. And then finally, right, I already said that, analysis and evaluation, defend validity. Right, I think key values for data science, if you were to ask me when I was hiring people, the key value for a data science person, I would have said would be curiosity, right? Curiosity, right, in that they want to kind of extend what they know how to do into new problem areas, and that's their raison d'etre, right? That's their thing that they're always supposed to be doing. So you want, curious, creative, critical thinkers, and you also want people that are patient and that can be good teachers, good communicators. That's absolutely key, because they're going to be continually engaging with folks on the business problem stakeholder side that don't understand, right, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Right? So you want to be able to bring people along to teach them. Your last group is your kind of executive level, the deciders, right? They need to be formulating high-level business strategy, and your organization might want to incorporate AI and machine learning into that high-level business strategy in some way. This is absolutely the situation, right, that I found myself in at NM, where I was, working with a group that wanted to do this. They wanted to build AI into their business plan, right, in a place that had never been used before. So they own long-term strategy. They need to gain competitive advantage in the market. They need to bring value to the organization. And what they really need to do is, I think, formulate, execute like a large, high-level methodology, right, a plan to solve business problems that integrates AI and machine learning in a productive, useful way. I think they actually need some fairly high-level thinking skills and consequence, right? They need to be able to synthesize, to compile knowledge from different areas to see that this problem and this AI technique can be matched up to produce something of value. They need to be able to evaluate, right? Because they need to be able to defend their plans to their own bosses. And the key value here to me is leadership, which is a, exceedingly difficult thing to teach or to learn, right, how to do. Because I think it involves inspiring others to want to do what you want them to do, and I don't know that there's an easy way to do that. But if you've got that, right, and you've got these skills, synthesis and evaluation, right, then my sense is that it should be possible to formulate and argue and defend, right, a business strategy that involves AI and machine learning. Right, so those are my lessons learned. I'm going to ask my colleague George here to introduce himself and talk a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Wonderful, thank you. So, I'm not a subject matter expert in the AI space, but I have incredible access to people, exceptional subject matter experts like Jeremy, to help in my space, which is adult and continuing education. My role at MSOE is really as executive director of the new Center for Professional Education. My job, working along with my staff, is to translate the knowledge that we have in a way through various types of programming to audiences like this in a way that can be readily consumed, applied, and effectively used. That's my job. So in adult and continuing education, there's three primary rules. Know your audience, and know your audience. As I look out on this group, I don't know many of you. I know a couple of you, but not many of you. Jeremy did a wonderful job of categorizing the three primary audiences that we're really looking at as we're building out unique, high-value programs. As you were looking at those three audiences, the literacy audience, the applications audience, and the business strategy audience, I'm really curious to see from a show of hands which audience you associated with. And I think that'll help us too as we're going just a little bit further before we open it up for questions and move on from there. So, literacy. How many of you really associated yourself and your position and current work or work function with the literacy group? Okay, smaller group. How about the second, applications group? And I would add for this group too, oftentimes as we're looking at the programming under this space, we're looking at those individuals who are the data users or super users, those that are really hip deep in data work. And and find themselves pretty much isolated in that, working in that space. So again, how many of you are in the applications and data space? Okay. Last one's business strategy. How many of you would identify yourself in that space? Okay, a very large group. All right. And for those of you that didn't raise your hand, I'm assuming that you're here just to learn more about AI because it hasn't quite hit your plate at work, but you want to be prepared or at least have some subject matter knowledge or expertise in the space. Is that right? All right, good. So I'm going to go through. I want to be attentive to time, and we want to make sure we give you 15 minutes for questions. So again, I oversee the new Center for Professional Education at MSOE. Our focus is really on expanding programming in those areas that we define as being innovations. You may recall how many of you have been employed for the last 10 years? Okay, most of you. So when you think back to the last 10 years and you think of innovations that have occurred during that time, obviously AI jumps to the front of the list for right now, right? Cybersecurity, digital marketing, data science, even the further back, the internet, right? I mean, all those things that when they happened, there was a rush for people that had my background to put together education programming to bring people up to a knowledge level where they contribute to advancing that innovation. And that's really what professional education is all about, and really the focus that we're currently involved in at MSOE related to AI education. But there's other drivers of professional ed are also included here, but again, innovation is probably the primary one. It's also the primary source of new programs and new program ideas within a professional education operation such as ours. So we offer programs for two primary audiences, working adults and then companies who are training their internal staff, but are reaching out to groups like ours to come in and provide that contract or customized training support. We are significantly expanding the delivery modalities that we have compared to what we have typically done at MSOE to make sure we're reaching as many people as we possibly can. Well, you'll recognize that during your work life, which oftentimes ranges from about 40 to 50 years, right? Depending on your profession. People within that range, within a 40 to 50 year age range, all learn differently. And a lot of it's based on their experience, right? We find that people in the 25 to 35 range are very much focused on more of the technology-based learning, online webinars, some of those types of things, asynchronous, synchronous programming, where individuals on the other side of that spectrum, that age range, tend to really appreciate more of the face-to-face, interactive type learning that has really been our bread and butter for quite a while. But our goal right now is to expand out to a number of different areas, and this includes programming utilizing these formats and delivery modalities in the AI space. We have a number of current programs both on the credit side and then also on the developing on the non-credit side. My focus has been and will continue to be for the next year or more on the non-credit side and those individuals that are not looking for a higher level credential, like the ones listed here. Most of you have, I'm sure, some level of experience with credit-based credentials, both undergrad and potentially graduate level credentials as well. But these are established programs and they're exceptional. And in part they're exceptional because there's subject matter experts like Jeremy who are currently serving as instructional resources for those programs. We are also developing an extensive line of non-credit programs, including programs in the AI space. We're building out some short courses. Most recently developed, introduced, and offered an ethics of AI course. Jeremy referenced a little bit around the ethics space as he was going through the early part of his presentation. We're also going to be offering a series of webinars, a summer series to start with, and then expanding out from there. We are coming up on offering in the middle of next month more of an industry vertical type program in the medical device space and how AI is being applied and utilized in the medical device arena and in what ways and to what level of effectiveness. I don't know if that's an interest of anyone here, but if it is, please let us know. We'll connect you with that program. Other webinars would include webinars that would focus more on the audiences that Jeremy originally introduced. We are also building out, with Jeremy's help and 6 other dedicated faculty members from MSOE, a series of 3 professional certificates. Non-credit, think of these as 10 to 20 hours of learning, direct interaction with faculty and or content, to become more familiar with each of these different categories and to better position yourself as a professional to engage in or to further advance your current work in the AI space. The 3 certificates that will be launched in fall include a certificate in literacy, one in applications, and one in business strategy, very consistent with what Jeremy had shared. We're also looking at, because the content, there's so much content around the application space, we'll be developing and offering an advanced application certificate that'll be launched in spring. These programs are online, synchronous, meaning scheduled and with direct interaction with faculty and other students. And again, will be available right away in fall, and then will be repeated and updated on a regular basis, recognizing how quickly the information changes in the AI space. I'm going to stop there, and we're going to open it up for questions or comments or other thoughts. So why don't we do so, and Jeremy and I can share a microphone as we're taking your questions. So, thoughts, questions on what you heard today related to AI and also the direction that MSOE is going in the professional education space? How do you feel about, yeah?
So it seems the popularity of ChatGPT over the last, 24 months that it's been. Interested to know the perspective of the first speaker that's been kind of around AI for some time. Years ago, automation and manufacturing, everybody was up in arms that it was going to take human jobs and get rid of human jobs, and I feel like there's a little bit of that now because it's become more of a soft skill. Interested to know in the work that you've done, it seems to me the best companies figure out how to use AI to make humans better and better positioned to make a product better or a service better or be more creative. Interested to know like what your experience is with how smart companies pair AI with smarter people to deliver better results. If you've seen that, or if you've seen failures where they think that AI can take all responsibility away from human.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you're talking about the recurring cycle of like human development, right? Like, you know, for hundreds of years, right, new technology has displaced old ways of doing things, right? So I think with AI, my sense is that, so economists talk about this thing called total factor productivity, which is like the rate at which your labor creates output, right? And over the last 1,000 years, it's just gone up and up and up and up and up, right? So I think that's how you think about AI, right? It's certainly going to, when you pair it with people, increase their productivity. The question is how quickly, right? If the productivity of an individual paired with an AI goes up, you know, super fast, you know, super fast, then I think you have displacement of people. I think people will lose jobs. If, on the other hand, it's a bit slower than that and smoother, right, then I think people will adapt. And that's kind of what I would expect at a macro level. In terms of the second part of your question, like what are some like successes and, you know, failures that I've seen? So I've seen, to be honest, I've seen mostly successes. I've seen mostly successes because most of the time when I've managed or been involved with trying to build and deploy machine learning or AI type solutions, it's to augment, right? Not replace, not to copy, it's to augment. To give someone the ability to bulk triage millions of, you know, pieces of information that they couldn't otherwise do. And I think that's often very successful. I think that's often very successful because, you know, you're pairing an AI with a person. That person can, you know, kind of compensate for the mistakes that machine learning and artificial intelligence models make, which they will make mistakes for sure. And then the AI complements them by allowing them to parse a lot of information a lot more quickly. So I haven't seen a lot of failures, and I'm not sure if that's like a commentary on my limited aperture or on my wisdom in managing and preventing bad decision making. But I think if you did try and wholesale replace people, that would be deeply problematic because, like I said, AI and machine learning models make mistakes. And unless you have a really, 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 really good model and you're subject to no liability from that model making mistakes, that seems pretty dicey to me. To say nothing of things like model drift and stuff like that.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yeah, please.
Besides healthcare, what industries are using AI the most?
What industries are using AI?
That, to be honest with you, that's not something I've studied explicitly. I think the promise of so first of all, AI is like the cool term, but really, the set of techniques that currently lives under the AI umbrella is, as I said, very old, and includes stuff that would have been called something else 10 years ago. So lots of industries use these things, and for example, my neighbor works for a Fortune 500 company in the Milwaukee area that has just recently in the last year rebranded all of its legacy, decades-old statistical techniques as artificial intelligence. So it's a little hard to say, to answer your question directly, it's a little hard to say. I think another way to think of it though is this way, right? Something like ChatGPT, or AI chatbots or large language models in general, are so promising because they cross task boundaries, right? You can use them for a lot of stuff. And because of that, just about any workplace can take some advantage of this, in my humble opinion. Like, for example, if I'm a person and I want to write an email to my boss and ask for a week of vacation, and I'm new and I'm afraid and I don't want to do it, it might take me a long time. I can have ChatGPT do that in 8 seconds, right? That kind of thing I think is ubiquitous and can be applicable anywhere. So sorry for the maybe not super direct answer.
All right, other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about AI because it definitely fits in bits, right? So ones. Is the next revolution for AI is with quantum computing then? Is that just going to take AI to the next level?
Yeah, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I don't study quantum computing. My sense is that the promise there is partially related to the ability to search large spaces very quickly, and so all models, all AI models are that problem. You're searching a big space, to try and find the best combination of parameters that lead to a good model. And I think that may be one of the areas where quantum computing holds some promise, but you have to take that with a big grain of salt because my research area is very different. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
For you, the courses coming up in the fall.
Yeah.
I closed my folder.
Professional certificates and yeah.
The ones that are coming in the fall, business strategy, et cetera. Is there an available curriculum? Will there be an advanced? Is that decided yet? Do you have a 7-second Cliff Notes version of this course offering?
Yeah, great question. We will be sharing the information well before the programs are offered, at the time that we're introducing and opening registration for the programs, which should be around the middle part of July. The curriculum, the faculty curriculum planning group is currently defining really the scope, the breadth, the depth of content, the format of the programs, our requirements, resources, all that. So that's currently under development, but as soon as it's available, we're willing to share it. It will be, just to get people thinking, number one, about what group or program they might fit best, and number two, whether or not the content that we're sharing in each complements what the learning needs are. So, and that's a great lead-in, thank you, for really the last ask that I'm going to make of this group. We've mentioned that we can't do this in a vacuum. Everything we do has to be both need-based and industry-informed. We don't want to put a product out there that we don't know for certain is of interest and value to the people like yourselves who would be potential or prospective students. We are, as part of this development, the curriculum planning exercise, we're helping or supporting faculty by conducting some brief 30-minute interviews with individuals that associate with one or more of these groups that we described, just to get a sense as to kind of what your thoughts are related to the competencies that you're looking to develop as a result of potential participation in the program, then what content we might include the certificates, even a little bit on the format and structure of the certificates. If you have an interest in serving in that role and being interviewed through, let's call it a focused interview for 30 minutes, and you feel like that's something you would like to and feel strongly you could contribute to, please stop up and see me. I'd love to get your name, information, and get you scheduled for one of those interviews just so we can continue to collect information and make sure the product we're developing and offering is hitting its mark. So thank you in advance for that. Thank you on behalf of Jeremy and myself for your attention and participation today. And I want to thank Jeremy himself for taking the time on his busy, busy day to come out and participate in this presentation. So thank you.